Welcome back to Bodycam Reality. What happens when arrogance collides with resilience? Today, we share 3 dramatic stories. A deceitful worker who learns the hard way, a law student who champions justice, and a 19-year-old cashier who handles entitlement like a pro. Stay with us for lessons in humility, wit, and determination. Samantha walked into her government office each morning with the confidence of someone who believed she was untouchable. She had carved out a reputation as an employee who knew how to get things done. But those who worked closely with her knew the truth. She thrived on bending rules and exploiting loopholes. Samantha's charm and superficial adherence to workplace policies masked a troubling habit of skirting regulations to suit her needs. It wasn't long before her increasingly bold behavior started to draw suspicion. It began subtly. Samantha, who worked in a department responsible for managing sensitive public data, started claiming overtime hours that didn't quite add up. Her colleagues noticed but hesitated to report her, partly because she was good at covering her tracks and partly because she was intimidating. Samantha knew the policies better than most and wasn't afraid to remind others of her rights. She would frequently quote obscure rules during meetings, creating an illusion of expertise. To her, the policies were less about ensuring fairness and more about crafting a shield to protect herself. Her confidence grew after her initial infractions went unchallenged. Samantha began emailing sensitive government documents to her personal account, claiming it was for efficiency. She would argue, "If I can access these files from home, I can get ahead on work. It's a win for everyone." In truth, the files often sat untouched in her inbox, and she had no legitimate reason to access them outside the office. This behavior raised eyebrows, but when questioned, Samantha would respond defensively, "It's within my rights as an employee. Are you accusing me of something?" Her tone was sharp enough to silence most critics. As the months passed, Samantha's actions became bolder. She began recording conversations with colleagues and supervisors without their knowledge. She justified it to herself as a form of protection, convinced that if anyone challenged her, she could use the recordings as leverage. She didn't stop there. She recorded private meetings involving sensitive discussions about workplace changes, and even documented interactions with members of the public who relied on her department's services. Her behavior violated privacy laws, but Samantha felt untouchable. After all, she had a solid understanding of workplace rules, or so she thought, and believed she could talk her way out of any situation. Her actions didn't go unnoticed for long. Michael, a seasoned union representative, was brought in after a colleague flagged concerns. Michael had dealt with difficult employees before, but Samantha was uniquely challenging. In their first meeting, she presented herself as a victim, claiming she was being unfairly targeted for her ambition. "They don't like that I'm efficient," she said, crossing her arms. Michael remained professional, explaining the allegations against her and offering her clear advice. "Cooperate fully, stick to the facts, and avoid escalating the situation." Samantha nodded, but internally dismissed his guidance, convinced she could handle things her way. Michael followed up with a detailed email outlining steps Samantha needed to take to address the issues. "It's crucial you're honest and transparent during the investigation," he wrote. Samantha didn't even read the full email. To her, Michael's advice was unnecessary. "I know how this works," she muttered to herself. She believed she could outsmart the system and had no intention of playing by the rules. The breaking point came during a routine audit of departmental overtime. Samantha's name stood out immediately. She had logged hours on days when she was nowhere near the office, including a week when she had been vacationing in Europe. When asked for an explanation, Samantha claimed she had participated in virtual meetings and worked remotely, despite having no documentation to support this. Her colleagues, who had attended the supposed meetings, stated she hadn't been present. Still, Samantha remained defiant, accusing her accusers of misunderstanding or misremembering events. Word of her actions spread through the office, and tensions grew. Samantha's habit of emailing confidential documents became a topic of heated discussions among her peers. Many wondered why management hadn't acted sooner. Meanwhile, Michael grew increasingly frustrated. He saw Samantha ignoring his advice and digging herself into a deeper hole. He reminded her repeatedly to be honest and cooperative, but she brushed him off, saying, "I've got this under control." One day, Samantha's manager, a no-nonsense woman named Karen Andrews, called her into a meeting. Karen had received reports of Samantha's covert recordings and demanded an explanation. Samantha, true to form, denied everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said with a forced smile, but Karen wasn't convinced. She informed Samantha that an internal investigation would be launched, and until its conclusion, Samantha's actions would be closely monitored. Instead of heeding the warning, Samantha doubled down. She began fabricating stories to justify her behavior. She claimed she had received verbal approval for her overtime and that her use of personal email was standard practice in her previous roles. To support her lies, she produced fake emails and exaggerated the truth during interviews with HR. Michael watched helplessly as Samantha's situation spiraled out of control. "You're not helping yourself," he told her sternly during one of their final meetings. But Samantha shrugged him off, saying, "They'll never be able to prove anything." What Samantha didn't realize was that her actions had already set a chain of events into motion that she couldn't control. The investigation uncovered glaring inconsistencies in her stories, and more evidence of her misconduct began to surface. Samantha remained confident, convinced that her understanding of workplace policies would protect her. She had no idea how wrong she was. By the time the first formal hearing was scheduled, Samantha's reputation was in shambles. Her colleagues avoided her, management scrutinized her every move, and even Michael had grown weary of defending her. But Samantha remained steadfast in her belief that she could outmaneuver everyone. As the hearing approached, she prepared herself for what she believed would be her ultimate victory. Little did she know, the storm was just beginning. The day of the formal hearing arrived, and Samantha walked into the conference room with her head held high, a thick stack of papers in hand. To her, this was her moment to shine, a chance to demonstrate her supposed wit and knowledge of workplace policies. She had spent the previous week crafting a narrative, complete with fabricated evidence and half-truths, convinced it would be enough to clear her name. The room was stark and serious, with a long table surrounded by individuals representing HR, management, and the union. Michael sat near Samantha, his expression a mix of exhaustion and resignation. He had repeatedly advised her to let him handle the proceedings, warning her that her self-representation could backfire, but Samantha was undeterred. "I know what I'm doing," she had told him with a dismissive wave. Now, as she prepared to speak, Michael leaned back in his chair, ready to observe the train wreck unfold. Karen Andrews, Samantha's manager, opened the meeting with a calm but firm tone. She outlined the allegations: unauthorized overtime, misuse of government resources, breaches of confidentiality, and failure to follow directives. Samantha smirked as Karen spoke, as though the accusations were beneath her. When it was her turn to respond, Samantha stood, adjusted her blazer, and launched into a rehearsed monologue. "First of all," she began, "I find it deeply troubling that my dedication to this department is being twisted into something sinister. Every action I've taken has been in service of my duties. If there was a misunderstanding about overtime or document handling, it's because of unclear communication from management." Her opening statement was met with silence. Karen and the HR representatives exchanged glances but allowed her to continue. Samantha went on, presenting her evidence, which consisted of doctored emails, convoluted timelines, and vague references to unwritten agreements. As she spoke, it became increasingly clear that her story was riddled with inconsistencies. She claimed to have attended meetings that her colleagues had testified didn't occur. She insisted that her unauthorized recordings were for training purposes, though no one had requested such materials. Every point she made seemed to dig her deeper into a hole. When Karen asked about the email logs showing Samantha had sent confidential files to her personal account, Samantha hesitated for the first time. I needed to review them at home," she stammered. "Sometimes the office network is slow, and I thought this would be more efficient." "Why wasn't IT informed?" Karen asked. Samantha had no answer. The discussion shifted to the unauthorized overtime claims. The audit had revealed not only that Samantha had logged hours during her vacation in Europe, but also that she had repeatedly claimed to work late nights without any corresponding activity on her office computer. When asked for proof, Samantha doubled down. "I was on calls," she said confidently. "They weren't recorded, but I assure you, I was working." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Who were you on calls with, specifically?" Samantha faltered. Various stakeholders." "Names?" Samantha's silence was deafening. Michael, who had remained quiet until now, decided to step in. "Samantha, do you want to clarify your position here? This is your chance to provide transparency." "I already did," she snapped, her frustration boiling over. "This whole process is a witch hunt. None of this would be happening if management wasn't trying to scapegoat me." Karen leaned forward, her expression steely. Let me be clear, Samantha. These are serious allegations supported by evidence. We are giving you an opportunity to explain yourself, but so far, your explanations don't align with the facts. At this point, Samantha made a fatal error. In a desperate attempt to shift blame, she accused her colleagues of conspiring against her. She claimed they were jealous of her efficiency and had fabricated the allegations to tarnish her reputation. "They've been out to get me since day one," she said, her voice rising. "This whole department is a mess, and I'm the only one who actually cares about doing the job right." Karen calmly asked, "Do you have any evidence to support these claims?" Samantha's response was a tirade of vague accusations, none of which were backed by proof. As she spoke, it became clear to everyone in the room that she was spiraling. Her arrogance, which had once masked her misconduct, was now exposing her for what she truly was, a liability. The turning point came when Karen brought up the unauthorized recordings. "Samantha, we have evidence that you recorded private conversations without consent. This is not only a violation of workplace policy, but also a breach of privacy laws. What do you have to say about this?" Samantha's composure cracked. I needed to protect myself," she said, her voice shaky. "You don't understand how toxic this environment is," Michael interjected, his tone firm but professional. "Samantha, I've worked with you throughout this process, and I've repeatedly advised you to cooperate and be honest. These recordings were not authorized, and using them as justification only compounds the issue." "I didn't do anything wrong," Samantha shouted, her frustration boiling over. "This whole thing is a setup." Karen sighed, clearly unimpressed. "We've heard enough," she said. "The evidence speaks for itself." The meeting concluded with Samantha being informed that the findings of the investigation would be reviewed by higher authorities. As she left the room, her confidence visibly shaken, Michael pulled her aside. "I warned you," he said quietly. "You had a chance to explain yourself and make amends, but you've made things worse for yourself. I hope you're prepared for what comes next." Samantha stormed out, muttering under her breath about incompetence and unfair treatment. She still believed she could outmaneuver the system, but the reality was that her actions had set her on a collision course with consequences far beyond her control. The storm was far from over, and Samantha was about to face the full force of accountability. The weeks following Samantha's hearing were a whirlwind of unraveling. It didn't take long for the department to finalize its investigation, and the findings were damning. The evidence against her was airtight: falsified overtime records, unauthorized use of confidential documents, and illegal recordings. These violations weren't just breaches of internal policies. They bordered on criminal offenses. Samantha, however, was unrepentant. She still believed she was untouchable, convinced her fabricated narrative would shield her from accountability. Her hubris blinded her to the mounting consequences that were about to crash down like a tidal wave. One gray Monday morning, Samantha arrived at the office to find an envelope on her desk. Inside was a formal termination notice outlining the justifications for her dismissal. Unlike standard termination letters, this one included an explicit clause: Samantha would not be permitted to resign or receive a neutral reference. Instead, the organization would provide a full disclosure of her misconduct to any future employer or government agency that inquired. As she read the letter, Samantha's face turned pale. Her confident facade cracked, replaced by panic and disbelief. She stormed into Karen's office, waving the letter. "This is outrageous!" Samantha shouted, slamming the letter onto Karen's desk. "You can't do this to me!" Karen, who had been expecting this reaction, remained composed. "Samantha, this decision was made based on overwhelming evidence. You were given multiple opportunities to explain yourself and rectify the situation. Instead, you chose to escalate it. This is the result of your actions." Samantha leaned forward, her voice rising. "I'll sue. This is defamation. I'll take this to the labor board." Karen met her gaze, unflinching. "You're welcome to pursue any legal action you see fit. Just know that everything we've documented is both accurate and admissible. The decision stands." Samantha stormed out, her threats echoing through the hallway. But her bravado was hollow, and deep down, she knew the odds were not in her favor. Unbeknownst to Samantha, her actions had already attracted the attention of higher authorities. The organization's legal team had flagged her unauthorized recordings and misuse of confidential files as potential violations of federal privacy laws. The Department of Justice, DOJ, was alerted, and an investigation was launched. One afternoon, 2 DOJ agents arrived at the office, requesting to speak with Karen and the HR team. Samantha, who was in the break break room at the time, watched the agents from a distance, her stomach sinking as they handed over subpoenas. She tried to act nonchalant, but her colleagues noticed her unease. Later that day, Samantha received a letter at her home, informing her that she was under federal investigation. The letter outlined potential charges, including unauthorized access to private information and breach of workplace confidentiality agreements. It also included a warning that any attempt to interfere with the investigation could result in additional charges. For the first time, Samantha felt a pang of genuine fear. This was no longer a workplace dispute. This was the federal government coming after her. Yet, even in the face of legal scrutiny, she refused to take responsibility. Instead, she doubled down on her narrative, telling friends and family that she was the victim of a witch hunt. Word of Samantha's misconduct spread quickly through the office and beyond. Gossip circulated about her behavior during the hearing and the mounting evidence against her. While some colleagues were shocked by the extent of her violations, others felt vindicated. Samantha's arrogance and entitlement had long made her a polarizing figure, and many believed her downfall was inevitable. Social media didn't help her case. A former colleague leaked details of the investigation, and within days, local news outlets picked up the story. Headlines painted Samantha as a cautionary tale. Local employee faces federal charges after misusing government resources. The comment sections were brutal, filled with remarks about entitlement, privilege, and self-sabotage. Samantha tried to defend herself online, posting long, rambling explanations about how she was being unfairly targeted. But her posts only fueled the fire. Former co-workers chimed in, refuting her claims and sharing their own experiences of her behavior. The more she spoke, the more damage she did to her already tarnished reputation. The day Samantha was summoned to meet with DOJ investigators, her confidence was visibly shaken. She arrived with a hastily hired attorney who had already expressed concerns about the strength of her case. Samantha's attempts to justify her actions during the meeting only made things worse. When asked about the unauthorized recordings, Samantha claimed she had taken them to protect herself from potential workplace harassment. However, when investigators pointed out that the recordings included private medical information about clients, her justification fell apart. Regarding the confidential files she had emailed to herself, Samantha insisted it was for work efficiency. But when investigators presented logs showing she had accessed these files outside of work hours with no legitimate reason, she had no response. The overtime fraud was the nail in the coffin. Investigators showed her detailed reports of her logged hours compared to her actual activity, including timestamps proving she had claimed to work while vacationing in Europe. Samantha's explanation: "It must be a clerical error." The investigators weren't convinced. By the end of the meeting, it was clear Samantha was out of her depth. Her attorney advised her to cooperate fully moving forward, but Samantha's ego wouldn't allow it. She continued to insist she was being unfairly targeted, even as the evidence against her mounted. A few weeks later, Samantha received a formal notice from the DOJ. They had decided to pursue charges against her, including fraud and violations of privacy laws. The notice outlined potential penalties, including hefty fines and the possibility of jail time. Samantha's termination became official, and her name was added to a federal database of individuals deemed ineligible for government employment. Any hopes of finding another job in the public sector were effectively destroyed. As she packed up her belongings from the office for the last time, Samantha couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and disbelief. How had it come to this? In her mind, she had done nothing wrong, but the reality was that her actions and her refusal to take accountability had led her to this point. In the months that followed, Samantha faded into obscurity. Her legal battles continued, but her chances of winning were slim. Meanwhile, the office she left behind began to rebuild, implementing stricter policies to prevent another situation like hers. Michael, relieved to be free of the chaos, reflected on the experience as a cautionary tale. Samantha's downfall wasn't just about breaking rules, it was about the dangers of arrogance and the refusal to accept responsibility. In the end, her inability to see beyond her own sense of entitlement had cost her everything. For Samantha, the consequences of her actions were a harsh but necessary lesson. No one is above accountability. Ethan Carter, a sharp and determined final-year law student, had always believed in fairness and justice. He wasn't the type to shy away from challenges, whether they were academic, personal, or professional, but he had never anticipated the battle awaiting him in his own law school. The arrival of Ms. Clarissa Drake as the new assistant dean was supposed to signal progress, a breath of fresh air for the university's leadership. Instead, it became the beginning of a turbulent period, one that would test the resolve of every student in the program, especially Ethan. Ms. Drake, nicknamed the Enforcer by students, wasted no time in establishing her authority. She quickly introduced a series of stringent rules that, according to her, were designed to protect the institution's reputation. These measures, however, disproportionately affected students, particularly those who relied on internships and extracurricular activities to build their careers. Under the new regulations, students were barred from accepting unpaid internships without prior approval, severely limiting opportunities in public interest law, a field many aspiring lawyers depended on for experience. Ethan noticed the ripple effects almost immediately. His classmates whispered in hallways about revoked internships and the uncertainty of their futures. His friend Mia, who had worked tirelessly to secure a spot at a nonprofit organization, found her position rescinded due to the new rules. Frustration simmered beneath the surface, but no one dared to speak out, except Ethan. He attended a town hall meeting hosted by Ms. Drake, hoping for clarity or at least an opportunity to challenge her reasoning. The meeting, however, was a tightly controlled affair. Questions were pre-screened, and dissent was subtly discouraged. Ethan sat quietly at first, listening to Ms. Drake justify her policies with polished rhetoric about upholding standards. When the floor was opened for questions, he raised his hand. "Assistant Dean Drake," Ethan began, his voice calm but firm. "You've spoken extensively about maintaining the institution's reputation. Can you explain how restricting internships aligns with preparing students for the realities of legal practice? Many of us depend on these opportunities to develop our skills and build networks. How do you propose we compensate for the loss?" A tense silence filled the room. Ms. Drake's smile faltered, but only briefly. "Mr. Carter," she said, her tone clipped, "these regulations are designed to ensure that every opportunity reflects positively on the university. Unpaid internships, while noble in intent, often lack oversight and can lead to situations that undermine the credibility of our program. I understand your concerns, but these measures are necessary for the greater good." Ethan wasn't satisfied. "Respectfully, Assistant Dean, credibility isn't built by limiting students' access to growth opportunities. It's built by producing competent, ethical lawyers. Your policies might protect the university's image, but at what cost to the students?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Ms. Drake's expression hardened, and she quickly moved to the next question, effectively shutting Ethan down. But the spark had been lit. In the days that followed, Ethan became the unofficial leader of a growing movement among the students. Conversations in classrooms and study lounges turned to strategies for resisting the new policies. Ethan began researching university bylaws and policies, searching for loopholes or procedural errors he could leverage. One evening, while poring over documents in the library, Ethan stumbled upon something unusual. A memo from Ms. Drake's office outlined plans for an even stricter policy that had not yet been announced. The memo detailed restrictions on external publications and media appearances by students, effectively muzzling their ability to speak publicly about their experiences. Worse, it appeared the policy was set to go into effect without consultation or approval from the student body. Ethan's hands trembled as he read the document. This was bigger than he had imagined. It wasn't just about internships anymore. It was about control. He realized that if Ms. Drake succeeded, the students' voices would be silenced completely. Determined to act, Ethan copied the memo and began formulating a plan. The next morning, Ethan gathered a small group of trusted peers in a quiet corner of the campus cafe. Among them were Mia, his closest confidant, Raj, a tech-savvy student who could help with digital outreach, and Sarah, a member of the university's law review who had connections with influential alumni. Ethan laid out the memo and explained the urgency of their situation. "We can't let this happen," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "If this policy goes through, we lose more than just internships or opportunities. We lose our ability to fight back. We need to act now." The group agreed, and within hours, they had a plan in motion. Sarah reached out to alumni who were known advocates for student rights, including a few prominent attorneys. Raj created an anonymous website where students could submit their stories about how the policies were affecting them. Ethan drafted a letter outlining their concerns and included the contents of the memo, sending it to every faculty member and administrator he thought might listen. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Students flooded the website with testimonials, many of them heartbreaking accounts of lost opportunities and financial strain. Alumni began forwarding Ethan's letter to their networks, amplifying the message. Faculty members quietly expressed their support, though few were willing to take a public stand just yet. Meanwhile, Ms. Drake caught wind of the unrest. She called an emergency meeting with her staff, determined to quash the rebellion before it gained more traction. But her efforts only fueled the students' resolve. Ethan and his group decided to escalate their campaign, organizing a petition demanding the suspension of the new regulations and the immediate withdrawal of the pending policy. Ethan knew the risks he was taking. Ms. Drake was powerful, and the administration had a history of protecting its own. But he also knew that change rarely came without sacrifice. As he prepared for what would undoubtedly be a fierce battle, he couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. For the first time, the students were united, their collective voice growing louder by the day. By the end of the week, the petition had amassed thousands of signatures, and letters of support poured in from alumni and legal professionals alike. Ethan stood at the forefront of a movement that had begun to take on a life of its own, but he also knew that the real fight was just beginning. Ms. Drake wasn't the type to back down easily, and Ethan would have to be ready for whatever came next. Unbeknownst to him, Ms. Drake was already preparing her counterstrike, a move that would push Ethan and his allies to their limits and set the stage for the next chapter of their battle. The fallout from the students' resistance campaign sent shockwaves through the university. Ethan Carter's name had become synonymous with defiance, and while many students rallied behind him, tensions with the administration reached a boiling point. Ms. Clarissa Drake, the assistant dean, was livid. For years, she had built her reputation as a no-nonsense leader who could crush dissent with a single directive. Ethan, however, had become a thorn in her side, one she was determined to remove. Behind closed doors, Ms. Drake convened an emergency strategy meeting with her most loyal staff members. Her goal was simple: neutralize Ethan and his movement while preserving her authority. "This isn't about one student," she declared, pacing the room. "This is about maintaining control. If Carter thinks he can undermine this administration, he's sorely mistaken." Her plan was bold and cunning. Rather than directly confronting the petition or acknowledging the alumni backlash, Ms. Drake decided to revise her policies and push them through under the radar. The new version of the regulations, cloaked in softer language, still achieved the same restrictive goals, but appeared more palatable to faculty and students. She scheduled a quiet meeting with a small panel of administrative allies to approve the changes, skipping the usual channels that would involve student representatives. Ethan, however, had been anticipating a move like this. Through his growing network of allies, he learned about the covert meeting. A junior administrator, sympathetic to the students' cause, tipped him off about the revised policy and the planned approval process. It was a textbook example of bureaucratic maneuvering, but Ethan knew the stakes were too high to let it slide. Gathering his inner circle, Mia, Raj, and Sarah, Ethan outlined their next steps. "We have to expose this before it's too late," he said, his voice firm. "If they manage to push this through, it'll be nearly impossible to roll back. We need evidence, and we need it now." Raj immediately got to work digging through university email servers and document repositories, searching for any trace of the revised policy. Meanwhile, Sarah reached out to trusted faculty members, urging them to voice their concerns before the meeting. Mia, with her sharp organizational skills, coordinated with other student leaders to prepare a formal response in case the policy was made public. Late one night, Raj struck gold. He found an email chain between Ms. Drake and her allies discussing the revisions in detail. The language was clear. The new policy would still impose strict limitations on internships, external publications, and student-led initiatives, but was phrased to appear more collaborative and student-focused. The email also outlined the agenda for the upcoming meeting, including a timeline for quietly implementing the policy. Ethan wasted no time. With Raj's help, he compiled the emails into a comprehensive dossier and drafted a letter to the university's board of trustees, detailing the administration's underhanded tactics. The letter was both a plea for intervention and a warning. If the board didn't act, the students were prepared to go public with the evidence. The next morning, the letter, along with the email dossier, was delivered to every trustee, faculty member, and student leader on campus. It didn't take long for the news to spread. By lunchtime, the campus was buzzing with outrage. Students gathered in the courtyard, demanding answers. Faculty members, some of whom had been on the fence, began openly questioning the administration's motives. The university's local media outlet published an exposé, complete with excerpts from the leaked emails, further fanning the flames. Ms. Drake, blindsided by the leak, tried to regain control. She issued a statement claiming the emails had been taken out of context and accusing the students of spreading misinformation, but the damage was done. The leaked documents were clear, and her credibility had taken a severe hit. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, Ms. Drake moved up the approval meeting to that very evening, hoping to push the policy through before the backlash could fully unfold. Ethan and his team quickly mobilized. They organized a sit-in outside the administration building, drawing hundreds of students to protest the meeting. Signs and chants filled the air as the crowd demanded transparency and accountability. Inside the building, Ms. Drake faced an increasingly hostile environment. Several faculty members on the approval panel expressed reservations about the policy, citing the backlash and leaked emails. One professor, a seasoned legal scholar, confronted Ms. Drake directly. "Assistant Dean Drake," he said, his voice sharp, "this policy is a clear overreach. The students have valid concerns, and these emails suggest a deliberate attempt to bypass proper channels. How do you justify this?" Ms. Drake, visibly flustered, attempted to defend her actions. "The revisions were made in response to student feedback," she insisted, though her words rang hollow. "This policy is meant to protect the integrity of our institution." Ethan, who had managed to gain access to the meeting as a student representative, seized the moment. Rising from his seat, he addressed the room with unwavering confidence. "With all due respect, Assistant Dean Drake, integrity isn't about controlling students or silencing their voices. It's about fostering an environment where we can grow, learn, and advocate for justice, the very principles this institution claims to uphold." The room fell silent as Ethan continued. "These policies don't protect us. They stifle us. They undermine the very foundation of legal education. And the way they've been introduced, secretly, without consultation, is not only unethical, but a disservice to every student and faculty member here." The approval panel was visibly divided. Some members nodded in agreement with Ethan's words, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Ms. Drake, unable to contain her frustration, accused Ethan of grandstanding. "Mr. Carter," she snapped, "you seem to believe you understand the complexities of administration better than those who've dedicated their careers to it. Perhaps you should focus on your studies instead of stirring unrest." Ethan didn't flinch. "With all due respect, Assistant Dean, my studies have taught me to recognize injustice when I see it, and I won't stand by while my peers are silenced and their futures jeopardized." The meeting ended in chaos, with no clear resolution. Ms. Drake stormed out, her authority hanging by a thread. Outside, the protest had grown even larger, with students holding candles and chanting in unison. Ethan addressed the crowd, urging them to remain peaceful but resolute. "This isn't just about one policy," he said, his voice ringing through the night. "It's about our right to be heard and to shape the future of our education." The administration was now in full damage control mode, but Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. Ms. Drake was cornered, but she wasn't defeated yet. The next few days would determine whether the students' movement could truly bring about change, or if Ms. Drake's iron grip would prevail. For Ethan, the battle had become personal, and he was prepared to see it through to the end. The campus was electric with tension in the days following the heated meeting. News of Ethan Carter's bold stand against Ms. Clarissa Drake spread beyond the university, attracting attention from local media and legal professionals. Alumni networks buzzed with discussion, with many former students expressing their support for Ethan's cause. Petitions circulated online, gathering thousands of signatures from current students, alumni, and even prospective law students. The pressure on the administration was mounting, but Ms. Drake wasn't ready to concede defeat. Behind the scenes, Ms. Drake doubled down on her efforts to salvage the situation. She convened a private meeting with the university's senior leadership, attempting to frame Ethan and his movement as a disruptive force. "This is about the integrity of our institution," she argued. Allowing this kind of insubordination sets a dangerous precedent. If we don't act decisively, we risk losing control. However, not everyone in the room agreed. Dean Meredith Harper, a respected figure known for her measured approach, challenged Ms. Drake's narrative. "Clarissa," she said, her voice calm but firm, "this isn't about control. It's about trust. The students feel unheard and marginalized, and these policies have only exacerbated that divide. Perhaps it's time we reconsider our approach." Ms. Drake bristled but said nothing. She could sense her grip on the situation slipping. Meanwhile, Ethan and his team were relentless in their efforts. Raj continued to uncover more evidence of administrative overreach, including correspondence suggesting that Ms. Drake had intentionally bypassed the university's shared governance process. Sarah worked tirelessly to rally faculty members, urging them to vote against the policy if it ever reached the broader faculty council. Mia coordinated a series of peaceful demonstrations, ensuring that the students' message remained clear and focused. The turning point came when a high-profile alumnus, attorney James Whitaker, a prominent civil rights lawyer, publicly endorsed the students' campaign. In an open letter published in a major legal journal, Whitaker praised Ethan's leadership and criticized the administration for its lack of transparency. "Institutions of higher learning must champion free expression and critical thinking," the letter read. "Policies that stifle these principles are not only counterproductive, but antithetical to the mission of legal education." The endorsement sent shockwaves through the university. Faculty members who had previously remained neutral began speaking out, and even members of the Board of Trustees started questioning Ms. Drake's leadership. The administration called an emergency faculty council meeting to address the growing crisis. Ethan was invited to present his case at the meeting, a rare honor for a student. The council chamber was packed with faculty, administrators, and student representatives, all eager to hear what he had to say. Ethan felt the weight of their expectations, but knew this was his moment to make a difference. He began his presentation with a simple statement. "This is not just about policies. It's about the values we hold as a community." He proceeded to lay out his argument with clarity and precision, citing legal precedents, university bylaws, and the ethical implications of the proposed regulations. He spoke about the real-world impact on students, sharing testimonials from his peers who had been directly affected. "The role of this institution is to prepare us to become advocates for justice," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But how can we learn to stand up for what's right if we're silenced in our own academic environment? These policies don't protect us. They diminish us. They strip us of the opportunities and autonomy we need to thrive." As he concluded, the room erupted in applause. Even some members of the administration couldn't hide their admiration for his poise and eloquence. Ms. Drake, however, sat stone-faced, her frustration palpable. The faculty council deliberated for hours before reaching a decision. When the verdict was announced, it was a resounding victory for the students. The proposed policy was unanimously rejected, and a motion was passed to review all recent regulations implemented under Ms. Drake's tenure. The fallout for Ms. Drake was swift and severe. With her credibility shattered and her authority undermined, she was reassigned to a lesser administrative role, effectively removing her from any position of influence. The news was met with cheers across campus as students celebrated their hard-fought victory. Ethan, however, remained grounded. For him, the victory wasn't just about defeating Ms. Drake. It was about proving that collective action could bring about meaningful change. In the weeks that followed, he worked with faculty and student leaders to draft a new framework for student participation in decision-making processes. The framework was adopted by the administration, ensuring that future policies would be developed transparently and with student input. The gas station on 8th Avenue was buzzing with activity that evening, as it always was during rush hour in Miami. Cars lined up at the pumps, their drivers either chatting on the phone or staring impatiently at the ticking numbers on the pump meters. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed steadily as Tyler, a 19-year-old cashier with an easygoing demeanor, worked diligently to keep things running smoothly. Tyler had a routine, restocking shelves, greeting customers with a polite smile, and manning the register when the line grew. That evening, however, was different. The usual stream of customers had turned into a flood. The register line snaked toward the convenience store entrance, filled with tired commuters grabbing snacks, drinks, or last-minute lottery tickets. Tyler was doing his best to manage the rush. He darted between the shelves and the counter, multitasking efficiently to keep things moving. Just as he finished restocking the candy aisle, the entrance bell chimed sharply, louder than it seemed to Tyler's already overstimulated mind. He turned to see a woman walk in with a self-assured stride. Evelyn Prescott, though no one knew her name yet, carried herself with the kind of haughty confidence that immediately set her apart. Her heels clicked against the linoleum floor as she surveyed the line, her sharp features tightening into an expression of disdain. Without hesitation, Evelyn bypassed the entire line and marched straight to the register. The customers waiting their turn exchanged annoyed glances, muttering under their breath. Tyler, who was behind the counter scanning items for another customer, noticed her approach out of the corner of his eye. "Excuse me," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the din of the store. She didn't just speak, she commanded attention. "I need to pay for my gas. Open the register now." Tyler turned his attention to her, his brows knitting slightly in confusion. He was young, but he had encountered difficult customers before. Still, the sheer audacity of Evelyn's behavior caught him off guard. Politely, he gestured toward the line behind her. "Ma'am, I'll be happy to help you as soon as I've finished assisting the customers ahead of you. If you could please wait in line, it shouldn't take long." Evelyn's expression hardened. "Wait?" she repeated as if the word was foreign to her. "I don't have time to wait. I'm in a hurry. Just open the register." The murmurs from the line grew louder. A man in a Miami Dolphins cap muttered, "Some people think they're above everyone else." A woman holding a toddler on her hip shook her head and said, "Unbelievable." Tyler kept his voice steady and professional. "Ma'am, I understand you're in a hurry, but so is everyone else here. I'll get to you as soon as I can. I promise." Evelyn scoffed, crossing her arms. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I've been coming to this station for years, and I've never had to deal with such incompetence. What kind of operation are you running here?" Tyler felt his jaw tighten, but he refused to let her provocations get under his skin. His training had emphasized the importance of staying calm under pressure, and he prided himself on his ability to maintain composure. "I'm sorry you feel that way, ma'am," he replied evenly. "I'll do my best to assist you as soon as I can." Evelyn wasn't having it. She stepped closer to the counter, her voice rising. "Listen, young man, I said I need to pay for my gas, and I need you to open the register now. I'm not asking for much, am I?" The customers in line were no longer whispering. A man at the front of the line, a middle-aged construction worker with a thick Miami accent, spoke up. "Lady, there's a line for a reason. Get to the back like everyone else." Evelyn shot him a withering glare. "Mind your own business," she snapped. Tyler glanced at the growing line, his nerves beginning to fray. He didn't like confrontation, but he also couldn't ignore the tension building in the room. Evelyn's entitlement was throwing off the rhythm of the entire store. He took a deep breath, searching for the right words to de-escalate the situation. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I'm restocking some items right now, and the register is closed temporarily. As soon as I'm done, I'll reopen it and help everyone in the order they arrived." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Don't give me excuses. Open it, now." Tyler could feel the weight of every eye in the store on him. Evelyn's tone was growing sharper by the second, and the customers behind her were growing more vocal in their annoyance. Despite the tension, Tyler remained calm. "I appreciate your patience," he said, returning to the shelves to finish restocking. Evelyn, however, wasn't done. She turned to address the room, as if rallying the other customers to her side. "Can you believe this? I'm being ignored. This is terrible service." Her attempt to garner sympathy failed spectacularly. A young woman near the back of the line laughed openly. "Lady, you're not being ignored. You're being told to wait like the rest of us. Get over yourself." Evelyn's face flushed, but she stood her ground. Tyler, meanwhile, finished restocking the shelves and returned to the counter. He decided it was time to move the line along, starting with the customer who had been waiting the longest. "Thank you for your patience," Tyler said to the man at the front of the line, smiling warmly. "What can I get for you today?" Evelyn's jaw dropped. "Excuse me," she exclaimed. "I said I was next." Tyler turned to her, his expression calm but resolute. "Ma'am, I did tell you I'd help you after the customers in line. This gentleman has been waiting longer than you. I'll be with you shortly." Evelyn's mouth opened and closed as if searching for a retort, but none came. The customers in line were openly smirking now, clearly enjoying the sight of her being put in her place. And so, for the first time since she'd walked into the gas station, Evelyn was forced to stand at the back of the line. Her heels clicked angrily against the floor as she moved, her earlier confidence now replaced with visible frustration. Tyler returned his attention to the line, working efficiently to serve the remaining customers. The tension in the room began to dissipate as Tyler's calm professionalism restored order. But even as he worked, he couldn't help but wonder how Evelyn would respond next. One thing was certain, the evening was far from over. Evelyn stood at the back of the line, fuming. She tapped her foot impatiently, her manicured nails drumming on the handle of her oversized designer bag. She couldn't believe the audacity of that cashier. What was his name? Tyler? To treat her, like any ordinary customer. She glanced at the people in front of her, their casual chatter and amused smirks making her feel as though they were all conspiring against her. Evelyn wasn't used to being ignored, and she certainly wasn't used to being made to wait. Tyler, meanwhile, moved efficiently through the line. Despite the disruption Evelyn had caused, he maintained his steady pace, greeting each customer warmly and processing their transactions with ease. He could still feel Evelyn's presence looming at the back of the room, her frustration radiating like heat, but he refused to let it rattle him. Tyler had learned early in his job that losing composure never solved anything. As he served the next customer, a mother buying a bottle of water and a pack of gum, Evelyn's voice rang out again, sharp and cutting. "Are we seriously going to pretend that this is acceptable? I've been standing here forever." The mother turned around, raising an eyebrow at Evelyn. "You mean like the rest of us have been standing here? Welcome to waiting in line." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Evelyn flushed but didn't back down. "This isn't about the line," she snapped. "It's about respect. Good customer service means putting the paying customer first, not ignoring them." The man in the Miami Dolphins cap, now near the front of the line, snorted. "Respect goes both ways, lady. You don't just cut in front of everyone and expect a red carpet. Tyler's doing his job just fine." Evelyn's lips thinned, and she crossed her arms tightly. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Tyler heard the exchange, but kept his focus on the task at hand. As much as he wanted to intervene, he knew it was better to let the customers handle it. They seemed more than willing to defend him, and he appreciated their support silently. By the time Evelyn finally reached the middle of the line, she was seething. She tried to make eye contact with Tyler, willing him to acknowledge her, but he was too busy ringing up a man buying a lottery ticket. "Good luck with that, sir," Tyler said with a smile as he handed over the ticket. The man grinned back. "Thanks, kid. You're doing a great job, by the way." Tyler nodded in gratitude, the compliment a small but welcome boost to his resolve. Evelyn, however, had had enough. As soon as the man stepped aside, she pushed forward, cutting in front of a young woman holding a pack of chips and a soda. "That's it," Evelyn declared. "I'm not waiting another second. You're going to serve me right now." The young woman gasped. "Excuse me? You can't just cut in front of me?" Evelyn didn't budge. "I have places to be. I'm not wasting my evening standing here while this incompetent boy takes his sweet time." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Tyler, who was now staring directly at Evelyn. For a brief moment, he considered calling for a manager or security, but something in him decided against it. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate breath and stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said evenly, his voice carrying a calm authority, "I understand that you're frustrated, but you've already been asked to wait in line like everyone else. Cutting in front of another customer is not acceptable." Evelyn blinked, clearly not expecting him to confront her so directly. "I don't think you understand," she said, her voice rising. "I'm not asking, I'm telling you. You're going to open that register and serve me now, or I'm going to report you to your manager." Tyler's gaze didn't waver. "You're welcome to speak to my manager if you'd like, but the answer is still no. I'll assist you when it's your turn, just like I've assisted everyone else here." The room erupted in applause. The young woman Evelyn had cut in front of laughed openly. "Looks like you're not getting any special treatment after all," she said. Evelyn's face turned beet red. She opened her mouth to argue, but found herself at a loss for words. Finally, with a huff, she retreated back to her spot in line, her earlier bravado replaced by visible humiliation. Tyler returned to serving customers, but he couldn't shake the tension in the room. Evelyn was still a ticking time bomb, and he knew she wasn't done causing trouble. As he handed change to an elderly man buying a scratch-off ticket, he glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. She was muttering to herself, her hands fidgeting with her bag. The next customer approached, a middle-aged woman who leaned in and whispered, "Don't let her get to you, honey. You're doing great." Tyler smiled and nodded, grateful for her kindness. As the line continued to dwindle, Evelyn finally reached the front. Her expression was a mix of anger and forced composure. She placed her items on the counter, a bottle of water and a candy bar, and fixed Tyler with a piercing glare. Tyler met her gaze calmly. "Thank you for waiting, ma'am. What pump number are you paying for today?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. "You think you're clever, don't you? But you'll regret treating me this way. I'll make sure of it." Tyler didn't flinch. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he replied simply, scanning her items. "Your total is $5.75. Evelyn threw a $10 bill on the counter without another word. Tyler made the transaction quickly, handing her the change and receipt with his usual professionalism. "Thank you, ma'am. Have a good evening." Evelyn grabbed her items and stormed out of the store, the bell above the door jangling loudly in her wake. The tension in the room lifted almost instantly. A few customers clapped again, while others exchanged amused glances. Tyler let out a quiet sigh of relief, grateful that the ordeal was finally over, at least for now. Little did he know, Evelyn wasn't finished yet. Her next move would escalate the situation further, testing Tyler's patience and resolve in ways he never anticipated. Evelyn didn't go far after storming out of the gas station. Fuming with indignation, she sat in her car in the parking lot, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the steering wheel. She wasn't the kind of person to let things go, especially when she felt disrespected. To her, Tyler's refusal to serve her immediately was an insult, and she wasn't going to let some teenage cashier make a fool out of her. She pulled out her phone and began typing furiously, crafting a scathing review on every platform she could think of. Her words dripped with venom as she accused Tyler of being rude, incompetent, and unprofessional. Evelyn knew how to make an impact. She used capital letters strategically and included phrases like "worst customer service experience of my life" to ensure maximum outrage. After posting her tirades, Evelyn leaned back in her seat, satisfied, but she wasn't done. She glanced at the gas station, her eyes narrowing as she considered her next move. A phone call to the corporate office, she decided, would be the ultimate weapon. She dialed the customer service hotline and waited impatiently for a representative to answer. "Hello," she began, her voice sharp and commanding. "I'd like to file a formal complaint against one of your employees. He was incredibly disrespectful and refused to serve me. I believe his name was Tyler." The representative calmly took down her complaint, assuring her that the matter would be investigated. Evelyn smirked, confident that her actions would have consequences. Inside the gas station, Tyler had no idea about Evelyn's ongoing vendetta. He was busy cleaning the counter, the line finally having dissipated. Several customers had complimented him for how he handled the situation, which made him feel slightly better about the encounter. Still, he couldn't shake the lingering tension. The door jingled again, and Tyler looked up to see Evelyn marching back inside, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She approached the counter with an air of self-righteous determination. "I just spoke with your corporate office," she announced loudly, drawing the attention of the remaining customers. "They'll be hearing all about your unacceptable behavior." Tyler remained calm, his training kicking in. "I'm sorry you feel that way, ma'am. If there's anything I can do to assist you now, please let me know." Evelyn leaned closer, her eyes blazing. "You're going to regret the way you treated me. People like you shouldn't be working in customer service." Before Tyler could respond, an older man who had witnessed the earlier altercation stepped forward. "Lady, enough is enough," he said firmly. "This kid's been nothing but polite, and you've been nothing but rude. Why don't you leave and let the rest of us enjoy some peace?" The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. Evelyn's face turned bright red as she realized she had lost whatever shred of control she thought she had. Without another word, she turned and stormed out for the second time, the bell above the door jingling one last time. Tyler exhaled deeply, grateful for the support of the customers around him. While he knew Evelyn's complaints might cause some headaches for his manager, he also knew he had handled the situation with dignity. Sometimes, he thought, the best response to arrogance was calm persistence, and a little help from the people who saw the truth. 3 stories, 3 lessons. Arrogance falters, while calm and courage prevail. Let today's tales inspire you to handle life's challenges with grace and integrity. If you enjoyed this episode of Bodycam Reality, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories that touch the heart. Until next time, spread kindness.